Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, we're happy to have you along. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. You know, the list keeps growing each time of what we're asking you to do. So, this is a participatory program. And we have a sponsor. And, I've been making an appeal for sponsorships because we really needed to go on. And Baruch Hashem, we got a few. We could use some more. But thank you, a special thank you to all of you who responded so quickly to be able to keep the show going. This is sponsored by Binyamin A. Not A, Binyamin A. Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky, for your inspiring, meaningful, and humorous podcast. It's one of the only Torah Jewish podcasts I can listen to from beginning to end. Me too. I have no patience. I'm a huge fan and also agree that the show must go on. Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Binyamin A. And we're waiting for Binyamin B, C, and D to send in their sponsorships. We have a special treat for you today. And that is from time to time on the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, we have the schus to be able to have some guests. Now, I have to tell you up front, I have received criticism in the past that I talk too much when we have a guest. And I don't know if that's true. I obviously have things to say. Otherwise, you could just watch their podcast. You don't have to listen to me. But I do tend to make observations. I am the voice of the people. That's what I do here. I'm just sharing it. So we have with us this week Rabbi Zecharya Greenwald, a pillar of chinuch for many, many years. And he's written a new book called The Life After Teshuvah, which is available wherever fine books are sold. And frankly, also where not such fine books are sold. They're in the same place. I went down to check out some of the Sfarim stores, and there are some not such great books there. But this is one of those gems. So Rabbi Greenwald, welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
Thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky.
Now,
it's a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is ours. And most people who know Rabbi Greenwald will know him from a couple of places. They'll either know that he has been running the Me'or Seminary for
25 years.
25 years. Good Lord. He started when he was 16. Isn't that amazing? and of course, from his column in the Mishpacha.
And before that, the Hamodia.
And the Hamodia, as I remember, that's what I was coming in and going out at that
just
point.
Just to set the record straight, I opened Me'or when I was 40.
There you go. No way. Really?
We're the same age. Yes.
Oh, good Lord. I'm so sorry. Well, one of us held up better than the other. I'll tell you that one. I just came back from the dentist and, basically, we said, at our age and you wake up in the morning and nothing hurts, it means you're dead. But anyway, so, I only have one cavity. It'll be a lot of good. I think maybe we'll just film that and put that on. Just listen to me scream in pain for half an hour. Who wouldn't want to watch that? But anyway, your credentials go back much further than that. So, and the reason I say this is because your background is in chinuch. I was a Beis Yaakov, or is Beis Yaakov, and the chinuch column in the Mishpacha and the Hamodia was, of course, aimed at a Haredi audience. But this book is about how Baalei Teshuvah should be able to progress. So that doesn't sound like you have a resume to speak about Baalei Teshuvah. So there must be more going on in the Rabbi Zecharya Greenwald background that needs to be brought out to the fore to explain what brought this to fruition.
Okay, I'll start with the very, very beginning. My mother is a Baalei Teshuvah, so
Really?
I grew up as the son of a woman who in college discovered Yiddishkeit and has been an inspired woman ever since. So
Now, dad, the famous Ronald Greenwald,
was definitely not.
Definitely not.
Right. He came from a Hungarian-American family.
We have to come back one time and just talk about your dad. Because,
all right, that would be a pleasure.
I had this chus of knowing him. But right now we're talking about the book.
Okay. So I grew up in a home that had that presence and definitely that affected me, and I've, let's say, I lived with that since I'm born. That's
Now
number
you're
one.
65. So that means your mom had to get from in the 60s.
No, my mom was already married in the late 50s.
So how did she become a Baalei Teshuvah?
She,
There was no Teshuvah movement yet. I know that.
yeah, that's
Or Smer said they started in the late 60s.
yeah. She was one of those extraordinary individuals that found her way
On her own.
through it. Well, no one does it on their own, but with the help of people. But if she wasn't
In the
looking,
1950s?
if she wasn't looking for it, she wouldn't have found it.
In the 1950s, she
Late,
did.
late 1950s.
What was her background? Where did she come from?
She came from New York, East Flatbush. Went to Tilden.
Family wasn't Shomer Shabbos.
Went to Tilden High. My grandparents were not Shomer Shabbos. I grew up with my grandparents. Beautiful relationship, which is a story in itself. It's in the book. It appears in the book. And yeah,
Were they traditional?
On some level, yeah. They went to a conservative. They belonged to a conservative shul.
Right.
They were never Shomer Shabbos. When we used to go for meals, they would buy Meal Mart and paper plates, and
They didn't keep a kosher home even.
they never
Wow.
they never came even to a Shabbos. They came to us often. We've had them over, but they never spent the Shabbos together.
Wow. So your mom was mamish before it was
Popular,
in vogue.
right? Before it was absolutely.
Wow,
Yes.
that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes, and she's an extraordinary woman and well read and knowledgeable and a very, very special person in her own right. But I grew up in the house of a Baalei Teshuvah with grandparents that were not from, so it's not like
Right.
the world was not foreign. It was not.
Yeah.
It's not a foreign world.
You wear it well. I know. My family was never Shomer Shabbos, and I meet people who say, "Well, you can't understand Baalei Teshuvah because having grown up, from home, you don't know what it's all about." And I'm like, "Wow, am I doing a good job?" So your mom grew up, okay? So changes the whole perspective.
That's number one. Number two,
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Torah Semes, Yeshiva Spring Valley.
So you went to all the mainstream places.
Yeshiva Staten Island, Yeshiva
Wow,
Long Beach, Eretz Yisrael. I was
Not too many other people there had parents who were Baalei Teshuvah.
No, it was not common in my day. It was not so common.
The Baalei Teshuvah movement is considered to have started after the 6 Day War.
Right. Yes.
So your mother
Correct.
really beat the rush.
Absolutely, and not only that, but in my class there were almost it was rare. In my school today, I'll get to that. Let's go.
Sorry.
I'll go in the order of my introduction to the concept. As a teenager, I went through a lot of very, very deep thinking and questioning periods. I would say that intellectually, I'm a Baalei Teshuvah. Meaning, even though I never really went off the derech, Baruch Hashem, I was too scared. Hashem helped me that I was a scaredy cat, so I didn't do things that were dangerous. And I felt going off might be dangerous because what if I'm wrong? So I kept on. But intellectually, I went through a very, very serious introspection and learning process. I would say that if not for Rav Shlomo Hirsch, I probably would not have stayed for him.
Wow.
In spite of a very good education and good schools. But intellectually, I had so many questions. I was thinking about so many things. And the yeshiva movement in those days didn't really have, and there was no material. There was no reading material.
Right.
Rav Shlomo Hirsch saved my life.
Right.
So intellectually, I definitely went through a process where in my head I was not part of anything, and I had to find my way and discover and find myself.
At the risk
in
of
that.
being controversial, I would go so far as to say the Olam Yeshivas discourage that kind of thinking.
I don't believe they discouraged it. I believe they had no tools to deal with it. I don't think that would be a very damning statement, and it could be that there were people, and maybe today there are people like that, some, but I don't think that was the case. I think that they just had no tools
Right.
to deal with it. That was not. They were building schools, and in those days there were a lot of people that. Kids that came from families that were traditional, not so from, they were being taken into the yeshiva system, but they were creating a system. They were not necessarily bringing an intellectual process into it. So they're taking kids, and kids were becoming from, and kids grew up in a religious institution, so they were from. They weren't Baalei Teshuvah in the sense of an adult or even a teenager making decisions and moving. In any case, that was number 2. Number 3 was my Rebbe Reb Wolbe. My Rebbe Reb Shlomo Wolbe Zecharya Levracha was a Baal Teshuvah.
Really? I never heard that.
Yes, his father was a professor of linguistics and literature in 2 German universities at different times.
Wow.
He grew up. His mother was from. He said, if anything ever became of me, it's because my mother's tefillah by Hadlakas Neris. But his father was not. He went to university. He only came to yeshiva when he was 22 years old.
Wow.
I understand that he started keeping mitzvahs already at the age of 12. That's what I understand from the from different pieces of his biographic pieces. But he came to yeshiva to learn at the age of 22. He came to the Mir. So first of all, he had a very, very broad perspective.
Now this changes my whole understanding of the effect that Reb Wolbe had on society. That he was coming from an outside perspective looking in, which changes the whole way you look at everything.
Right. Even though he definitely became a part of it and integrated to that level of
listen. So did Akiva Tatz, but
Yeah.
because Akiva Tatz came from the outside, he's able to write fundamental books on hashkafa for people that other people can't.
That's right. Absolutely. So Reb Wolbe spoke to me. He knew chinuch was the only thing I was ever interested in. And he said to me at one point, the next biggest challenge that Klal Yisrael is going to face is the children of Baalei Teshuvah.
Was he involved in the Teshuvah movement?
Absolutely.
And on what capacity?
He would speak all over. Mostly in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
But even when he went, I was once with him in America. He went to Or Sameach, and they asked him to speak. So he spoke 8 languages. English he spoke phonetically. So once he once said a boy came late to Avad. He said, "Sit here. He says, "You be kapalit. You be kapalit." He said, "We didn't understand kapalit." He says, "I pilot. You kapalit. I'll be the pilot. You'll be the co-pilot." So he spoke English. He understood everything. I showed him my poems. I showed him my writings. He reviewed his own works when they were translated, which I had something to do with some of those. He understood English almost perfectly, but his speaking was a little bit hard. Right. So he gets to Or Sameach in Monsey and he starts speaking in Yiddish. And Rabbi Rakowski says, they don't understand Yiddish. So he went to Hebrew. So Rabbi said, no, not Hebrew. So he said, English. Do you understand that the Mashiach? He said, okay. So he started speaking. He started giving the shir. After 2 minutes, he looks up and he says, in Yiddish, he says, always, is allemal, me meint das me versteht nicht. It's the kemen, it's the viele meinen das me versteht. He says, usually when I speak, people think they understand what I'm saying, but they don't. Now they can't even think they understand what I'm saying. So, but he was involved, and he had Talmidim all over the world, in positions of Rabbanis and Kirov. I would probably say that Ber Yaakov produced per capita. Panovich maybe had the most Rabbanim or Rabbaim that came from there, or Shishivas, but they had 400, 500, 1,000, 2,000 students. Ber Yaakov never went over 100 Talmidim. And per capita, the amount of people that are in Kiev and Rabbanis and Rashivas and Ramim and teachers is beyond. In any case,
interesting, because Rabbi Moshe Shapiro also was very involved in Kiev.
Yes, Rabbi Moshe Shapiro was very involved in Kiev, and as you know, we met at his shir many times. Rabbi Moshe Shapiro at a later time in my life became a very very big influence on.
That's interesting.
On me as well.
How many? There were certain people who just were drawn to this Teshuvah movement.
Yes.
So people, I understand.
People who understood the volume and the opportunity and the amount of thirst and hunger that the leirov lalechem leitzama lamayim that the Navi speaks about, the no thirst for water and no hunger for food. Kim l'shmo es divrei Hashem, to hear Hashem's word it's mind-boggling,
right? And
it's still mind-boggling. The way things are happening now, the dynamic has changed, but the thirst is still considerable. In any case, he said to me, that's going to be the next biggest problem, because we are makar of people, but then we let them go. And there's very little follow-up, and there's not enough hadracha when a person is 5, 10, and 20 years later. The subtitle of the book, which is called Life After Teshuvah, is 5, 10, and 20 years later. And basically,
when I was in NCSY, this was a ongoing problem. Is that a kid would become frum, and then that's it. Now we're done.
Now swim.
Yeah. Now you're on your own. You know?
But you clearly can't be.
In fact, there's a major force in Kiruv today, without having to say anything bad about anybody, where they give a lot of money to Kiruv, but there are a lot of strings attached, and part of the strings are they have to get frum according to a set time. But if you want to keep getting funding from us, so you have to give them a number. Are they Shomer Shabbos? Are they putting on tefillin? Are they that? And once they become frum, you don't get any money for them anymore. That's it. You're done. Now move on, get somebody else. But people need chizuk their whole lives.
Absolutely. And especially people.
Moshe Shapiro once said to me, the biggest problem today is people need chizuk. If you can do anything that gives people chizuk, then you're mechuyev to do it.
Absolutely.
And especially these people who
they grew up in one world, and now they're living in another world.
Right.
They were raised in one world, they're raising children in another world. They were part of one educational system, they're part of an educational system that has nothing, no frame of reference. No frame of reference.
Right.
A society, different society, questions, worries, concerns, even doubts, self-doubt. These are all part and parcel of anyone that went through such, I don't know if I'm using the word properly, quantum changes, okay? Changes that are so
it's a good word.
that are absolutely in contradiction, simultaneously in contrast to who they are and now what they're doing. Of course, there's going to be questions, and of course, there's a need support. There are 2 chapters that speak about building a support system, because that is part of what's necessary. That is where the book was born, at that conversation.
One big problem, and I don't know if there's a solution to this, but a lot of the frum world works in what's known as protexia.
We speak about it at length in the book.
That's a nice word for corruption. But corruption sounds bad. Protexia has such a nice sound to it. These people come in, they don't have anything. They don't have a grandfather. They don't have they don't have a famous name. They have nothing. So they come in and, I remember I told somebody, a Sephardi was telling me, he said, I'm trying to get my kid into high school. And they have a quota? I said, don't complain to me. I'm an American. They don't have quotas. They could just tell us no with no problem.
So I once met.
No protexia.
I once met for my father, for a business deal. I met with Moshe Mandelbaum. Moshe Mandelbaum was the treasurer of Israel. When I met him, he was no longer the treasurer. He was a special reference to Ukraine and Russia for Rabin. Right. So I met with him about some kind of deal that my father was interested in doing, and I asked him how we would get past certain things. He says to me, what I like about Israel? I said, what is that, Professor Vanderbilt? He says, if you know the right people, you don't need protectia.
Yeah. And these people come in, they have nothing.
I speak about that.
So unless they get somebody who's willing to, what they call in the police department, a Gamliel, you know what I mean? Someone who's going to run block for them,
advocate.
Yeah.
So we speak about that, and we speak about protectia as not being something that's relegated to the Jewish world. That is the way the world works. If you go to Washington, everything's protectia. If you go to any kind of government, any municipal government, if you go to a big business, protectia makes a difference. You want to get an appointment, you call someone who knows somebody who knows somebody. Protectia is the way the world works. It may be a corruption of, in a sense, of how things should be, because in a utopian world, everybody would just have equal opportunity. But it's not the way the world works. And unfortunately, the frum world is not, in certain areas, it's not so different, because the fact of the matter is, if I don't know you, why should I trust? Why should I trust your business acumen? Why should I trust your knowledge? Why should I? It would be nice if we could meet every single person, do a deep interview with them, and spend 3-4 hours, get to know them, and then say, okay, now you can come for an interview.
But in America, if there was a government medical system, and
which there is,
you have an appointment, and I come in and I get to move to the top of the list because my mother's friendly with the secretary, you go to jail for that. That's against the law.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Okay, I'm just saying that that's called corruption. Here it's called, of course, it's protection.
Yeah, but when, I don't know when you go to jail, but when my father was sick and we needed to get into a hospital special unit and whatever, knowing the right people, making a difference. Right. It's not, there is no difference in this is human nature. This is part of human nature. Protects in the most basic structure of what it is because I know someone that knows you, it makes me feel that I know you as well. And therefore, I have easier access. So
I'm skipping a step now. So Rav Wolbe said to you, the next big challenge is going to be Baalei Teshuvah. Have you worked in any official capacity with Baalei Teshuvah?
So from the youngest age, I've spoken to Baalei Teshuvah. I've had, I gave classes to Baalei Teshuvah. Even before I was a Rebbe, just as a younger man, we had hundreds of Baalei Teshuvah come through our home. We had many that moved from there on. Rebbe Schuster would bring them Friday afternoon to our house, or Shabbos morning, depending. And Motzei Shabbos, he would come to take them, and often to a yeshiva.
Right.
And there are numerous Baalei Teshuvah, some living in Israel, some in America, that their first introduction to Yiddishkeit was in our home. This is something that has gone on for the 45 years we're married.
But you weren't in an official capacity.
So I never worked.
You worked with off the derech kids.
Yes, I worked with kids that were having a hard time, difficult time. And again, many of those kids were kids of Baalei Teshuvah. And this is really my fourth and most powerful introduction to Baalei Teshuvah world. And that is that in the 38 years that I'm in Chinuch, when I had a yeshiva for kids that were having a hard time, and the 25 years that I'm in girls' Chinuch, I would say that 30% of my students are children of Baalei Teshuvah. So I've gotten to see the wonderful and beautiful integration of many, and the very difficult and confusing and challenging of others.
I'll tell you something interesting. Rabbi Albin, who was running Or Sameach in Chicago at one point, and he had another fellow who was much younger than him, who had been in Or Sameach as well. And they came to a very yeshivish minyan. And they said, between the two of us, we could tell you that about 60% of this minyan started in Or Sameach. And not one of them will admit it.
Yes.
He says, they won't give us any money because the yeshiva from Lakewood will come to my house and give my children a bracha. I'll give him money. Why should I give it to Or Sameach? I want to forget that I ever came from that world.
Right. And that's really a part of the problem. Because when a person feels that they have to hide and run away from that past, that is an indication that our society has not yet fully appreciated, understood, and accepted the Baalei Teshuvah world. And that might be because of some who have a hard time integrating.
Right.
But when I went to Rav Aaron Feldman, who gave me an approbation for the Sefer, Haskam for the Sefer. And I know him for many, many years, and I know that he's one of the few English-speaking Rabbanim that could read the book and actually have a day on it. So the first time I gave it to him, I had a publisher that was looking to publish it, but he wrote 180 ha'aras on the book. Wow. 180 things that he thought were wrong with the book that I would have to fix. I gave it to Rabbi Aaron Feldman with all of his corrections. And I asked him if he would be kind to read it and tell me, should I just put the book away and just... He read it from cover to cover, and he said there are 3 points that you have to deal with. One is the halachic. Anything halachic has to be reviewed by. So I spoke to Dovid Cohen. I sent him everything that was halachic, and he responded with an okay on everything, a little bit more makel, a little bit more lenient on 1 or 2 things. And then he said, but you have to write in the book whenever there's a halachic thing, write in the book that you should speak to your rabbi because halacha is very complex. 2 other things that were more minor, but 3 out of the 180, the rest he said ignore. I did not publish the book with that publisher, but he's a wonderful man. He spent many, many hours on the book, and I appreciated it in my acknowledgments. In any case, when I came back a second time to ask him for a haskama, for an approbation, he said he doesn't really have the time, and
but he read it already.
He had read it a couple of years ago, and he didn't remember all the pratim, and he wasn't. In any case, I brought it to him again, and I asked him, please, it's very important that there be somebody of stature that just goes through it. And so he said to me, how important it is. Look, some people are so many are so integrated. I said, yes, there are, and some aren't. He said, I was kidding. Last week, I went to a bris of somebody who was a Talmud of mine in Ar Sameach, and that's why I went to the bris. He's the choshev guy in his shul. He's the gabbai. He's the president. He's like he's the whole macher in his shul. When I walked in, he didn't even come over to me because he didn't want anyone to know that he went to Ar Sameach. I said, Rosh Yeshiva, doesn't that tell us that we need to understand a little bit better the world of the Baal Teshuvah? And that if a person feels that he did so well and he's so successful, he has to hide? Why can't he be proud of an unbelievable process of something so extraordinary that he did and where he came from? And look where he is now. That's something that he should be. That's not something that's. There is a concept in the Mishnah of onas dvarim. You don't tell a person, right? That you used to do this avera. But to say onas dvarim, to say that if a person would be proud of the fact that he came from somewhere and he learned a lot and he grew,
Reish Lakish.
Yeah.
Reish Lakish is held up as,
that's right.
The guy was a murderer, a robber, right. And he became one of the biggest Talmidei Chachamim,
For sure. And Rabbi Akiva,
he's an Amoritz.
He was an Amoritz.
He was a downright highwayman.
He was right, 100% right. He wasn't about tshuva, but in a sense, he was an Amoritz that would have bitten.
Right.
He came from his midos
hostility.
There was pain. The Rebbe explains that he thought that the Talmidei Chacham didn't respect him because of the Hilchas Toma and Tahara. In any case, the point being that there's my introduction to that world was very, very deep from when I was born, through the way I grew up, through my own education, my own processing, and through the education of Rav Wolbe, and then the 30 years that I'm being osek in chinuch and dealing with the girls, the boys, their parents, and the extensive interaction with the parents over all these years, and the 45 years of having people in our home. So I would say that I'm deeply entrenched and involved in the world of Baalei Teshuvah. Now, Noach Weinberg Zatzal called me up once 30 years ago. We spoke. We had a kesher. He was a very extraordinary. I don't have to tell. Rabbi Weinberg was a giant. He asked me if I would join him. He says, I need a lieutenant. I need someone that I can trust and that can work
that
and
will do my vision.
And that will do. And I'm getting older.
That's why he used to fire everybody every 8 years.
Right. He says, I'm gonna need somebody. Yeah. I said to him, your job is to bring people to the frum world. My job is to make sure that there's a place for them to come to.
Right.
That there should be education for kids that don't fit and that don't need it. So he said, whatever it is. At that point, we parted as friends, and we stayed close for all the years. But he understood that I understood this world. He knew. We had conversations over conversations for years that he recognized and felt that I was able to be part of that world.
1983, he said to me, he was asking everybody who he knew. I was running NCSY on Long Island at the time. He says, if I gave you unlimited money, what would you do to save Klal Yisrael? I said, I would double the salaries of every Rebbe and every Morah and every day school in America. And he says, I'm talking about Kira, I'm talking about saving Klal Yisrael. He says, I've got a proposal here in Brazil. I have a proposal. What are you talking about? I said, Reb Noach, let's say I take you seriously, because nobody does. But let's say I take you seriously. You're going to makar 1 million people. You're going to drop them into a broken system. You're putting them into a barrel without a bottom, and they're going to fall out again. When I was in NCSY, the last 5 years, if a kid became frum, I didn't send him to a day school because I knew he'd get turned off to Judaism. I kept him in public school and then sent him to Eretz Yisrael because the system's broken. I said, if you don't have an infrastructure, if you don't have a successful frum world, then how in the world are you going to integrate these Baalei Teshuvah into it? You need and that's why the most effective galus we had was Bavel. Ad Kedei Kach that people didn't want to leave. Why? Because first, all the Chachamim went there and they built all the institutions and they had the infrastructure. So when Klal Yisrael came, there was a system. And like this, you drop people in, and this is what your book is about. These people come in without any guidance, without any support, and they have to find their own way. Now, you've delineated this into 5, 10, and 20. So how did you come up with that Hagdara? Where you go from 5 to 10 to 20? Or is that just random? Could it have been 6, 15 and 35?
Yeah, it definitely could have been. 5, 10, and 20 are numbers that are easier to spell.
Because you're saying in the first 5 years, there's a certain set of challenges.
Right.
Then after 10 years, there's a different set of challenges. Then after 20 years, a different set of challenges. Right.
And we go through all of them. we deal. I tried it. I think when I asked you what you thought about the book, you said comprehensive.
Oh yeah,
that was the word you used.
Right, because this is a big. But I've been writing a book on marriage and chinuch. I've been writing it now for the past 20 years. But the beginning, I talk about 50 years ago. What did people look for when they got married? 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and today, what do people look like? And the list is completely different. When my parents got married, they wanted to marry a Jewish person and bring up Jewish kids. That was their main goal. And everything else was secondary. Yeah, you wanted to find someone attractive and you wanted to make sure you make a living, etc. But that was your main goal. Today, I'm looking for someone who's going to fulfill me, entertain me, take care of me. So if you don't look at the progression, so when you look at someone who becomes frum and you say, what's the challenge of someone who comes frum? Obviously, somebody who's a Baal Teshuvah grandfather has a completely different set of challenges as a guy who just, got married and moved into a community and said, Haki Kamar, which I always thought was very funny. Esha Torah, they realized that their name was too hard for Baalei Teshuvah because they would say Esha Torah. So they just called it Eish. They took away that. Or Sameach has no mercy. Or Sameach. And then they made a kola called Meshach Chachma. Let's just have some fun at the Baal Teshuvah's expense. Yeshiva they can't possibly pronounce. I'm in Meshach Chachma. Anyway.
But I'll tell you, there was also a little bit of a difference in the culture of Esha Torah and Or Sameach. Or Sameach was very interested in the integration, meaning they took guys with, again, everyone could have their idea, what's right, what's wrong, I'm not. But Or Sameach integrated guys to go to yeshiva and to learn, to become Talmidei Chachamim. So the integration and, learn how to say Meshach Chachma, because that's where you're going to Kolo, guy. And Eish was more of a basic introduction, and then
It was very interesting. I taught in Aish, and then I went to Sameach, and I came up with a definition of the difference, and both places agreed with me. Not only did both places agree with me, we would say, but that they wouldn't. Sameach was a yeshiva. That's it. They didn't have any other agenda. It's a yeshiva for beginners, but that's our goal. Our goal is to teach you how to learn Gemara, and therefore a guy who's been learning here a number of years and goes to the Mir is a big success. Aish Torah is a kiruv movement to save Klal Yisrael.
Right.
As much as we need a yeshiva to train people, we do. But if a guy stays in the yeshiva or goes to the Mir and doesn't go out, he's a failure. He has to go out and save Klal Yisrael. So I don't know about today, but I'm saying when I was there, 20 years ago, that was the definition. Each place said, yeah, of course, but they wouldn't say that. Of course, or Sameach's a kiruv movement. And everybody says, no, we're not. We're a yeshiva, So each one has their own agenda. So, so let's start off. The first 5 years, this guy is fragile. I don't know if you have the statistic, what percentage of people become from give it up in the first 5 years?
I don't have percentages. I don't know if anyone does.
Really?
But it's enough to look at some of the blogs that are out there and of frustrated people who went to different institutions, even good ones, even very special institutions. There's definitely a voice out there of people who didn't find it. There was also a very silent voice of people who just disappeared, and they became religious. They became a little bit more religious, a little bit less. They didn't find shidduchim. They did find shidduchim. Right. And then they just disappeared. That's a silent number. That's a big number. I've had wonderful girls from the best schools who one of their parents are not really from, even though they're living from lives. They're part of the community. But the girl says, I don't know what to do. My mother puts the stuff on the stove after Shabbos. I'm not allowed to eat that. Like, once she learns halachas, what am I supposed to do? Mm-hmm. So there's a silent, I don't know numbers, and I don't know if anyone does. But there are a lot of people that don't make it. Don't make it in the first 5 years. Yeah. First 5 years are critical. Yes. And that's why the most important thing, I think you said, is they have to have a support system. Right. It was interesting when I was at the Project Inspire convention, and two different people mentioned this. They said, we got through Project Inspire, and we didn't know how to keep it going. There's a community in Borough Park that is designed to be mechazek Baalei Teshuvah. Baalei Teshuvah come in there in the heart of Borough Park, deepest, darkest Borough Park, and they take care of these young Baalei Teshuvah. Beautiful. It was it's amazing. I'm not familiar with that. Where if you had to advise somebody, where would you tell them to go? I think of a few places I wouldn't tell them to go, but where would you tell them to go? Where they can have a support community. First of all, more in the out of town communities. For some, because that's, again, it depends how integrated the person already is. Right. Does he have a Rebbe? Does he have a yeshiva that he still belongs to? The book is not necessarily for a boy who has a Rosh Yeshiva. He doesn't need me. Right. It could be that he'll appreciate a lot of things that are being written because he'll feel validated and understood, and maybe have some good points to think about, good thinking points. Right. But he doesn't need that book. Right. The Sefer was written for somebody who is not, who doesn't have that very strong anchor. Right. And that's unfortunately most Baalei Teshuvah. Because even if he has a Rav in the shul who he can talk to about certain things, there are a lot of things that he would think are taboo. He doesn't even know that he can speak about. I've had this year from people. I went someplace for Shabbos, and I'm finding all these laws, and I didn't know if I'm allowed to flush the toilet on Shabbos. Whenever I hear the story, I say, yes, absolutely. So my mother tells a story that there was one professor in college who was very upset with her that she was coming from. She says, this ridiculous orthodoxy, you can't tear toilet paper on Shabbos and this. And my mother says, what? So she went back to whoever she was working with. Said, is that true that you're not allowed? That's the very beginning process. But as I started becoming from around 12. Okay. And once you become from, now you're open game. Right. Now people say, why was there a Holocaust? Right.
I was like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how much toilet paper to tear for Shabbos, and he asked me about that. I know I didn't do it. Okay, that's all. It wasn't me. Like, how much demands could you put on a person?
Yeah.
So the first 5 years, people were fragile. So you would tell them to move to.
I would tell them to move to a place where there's a community, where there is
Rabbi
possibly.
Orlofsky said Milwaukee.
When Rabbi Twersky was, yeah.
Well, there's still a Rabbi Twersky there, you know.
Right. Okay.
You know, so
So it could, Milwaukee. There are many families in Passaic has a very, very large community, which automatically makes it a little bit supportive. I'm not sure that the schools are supportive and understanding, but the kehillas are supportive and understanding. There's again, Muncie. Every community today has a large population, but you have to know how to find them.
mm-hmm.
You have to know to look for the people that you need. For a family that's becoming from at a later age, I think it's better to be in an out-of-town community where there's no judgment and they can find their way slowly.
Let's say less judgment.
In fact,
I don't want to say no judgment.
Depends where.
Phoenix. Phoenix is pretty easygoing.
Phoenix and Houston and Dallas and Atlanta. There are cities that really are welcoming and understanding to people that are finding
Geisler,
their way.
who was a Rebbe for many years in America's Zecharya, and then in Teres Chaim. I saw him in America, and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm starting a program in Houston." He says, "Not even for Baalei Teshuvah. For my kind of boys who come back from America's and Teres Chaim and places like this, they don't have a place to go. So I'm building them a community in Houston."
Yeah.
Which I found amazing, you know. So you have to find these things.
Yes, you have to find them.
So,
and again,
you have resources in the book.
I gave some books as resources. I can't give people as resources without getting their permission, and I didn't get permission from the few people who I asked because they're overwhelmed. I think we're better off today with each person finding families, and I speak about building a support system of finding a family near you, somebody that you went to for Shabbos, somebody that you know in the community and that you can attach yourself to. It's also about not having family. When I ask, very often I've asked the girls in their interviews, tell me something special about your parents being Baalei Teshuvah, and tell me something that's challenging. Right? So there are those who say nothing, everything's wonderful. Most girls will say, well, it's inspiring and it's good to know that my parents made a decision and helps me understand that there's something to it. And some of them say my parents are still growing and they're still interested. One of the the two hard things that come up more than anything else is one, we have no family, no extended family. And two is that they don't know what to tell me. They can't help me in school. They don't know what to tell me. I don't have the direction that I need.
I had that experience when I moved to Eretz Yisrael because his father came from Poland, never learned English. So my father had to make it completely on his own. I grew up as an entitled American. I moved here and my kids are like my father because I can't help them. I don't understand the Israeli system. I don't have any connections. They have to make it on their own, you know? And so it was interesting. The Jewish Observer of Shalom, they had an issue dealing with this. And this one family wrote in and said, you don't understand the things that you take for granted that don't come to us. For example, you have a Bobby and Zadie who are going to buy your kids a Shabbos coat. Well, not everybody's going to buy us a Shabbos coat. All those little perks that you get from having a from family, we don't have those.
That's right. Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. And building a support system and learning to deal with understanding your own position, being validated. And there's a lot of validation in the book, just of a person understanding, okay, this is actually what I'm experiencing.
Right.
And these are some of the ways that I can reframe it or rethink about it. There's an interesting story of two neighbors that had babies more or less at the same time. One, 9 brothers and sisters, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and one sister didn't speak to her for 5 years. No grandparent, nothing. And they're both in the same hospital room, one next to the other, and she's feeling so lonely. And then the Rebbitzin from the shul comes with a box of chocolates. and says to her, whatever the name is, take advantage of the rest. I don't know how Chani's going to get through this because she hasn't had a moment of quiet since she had the baby, and you have time now. Take this precious time to rest, because when you go home, it's going to be
beautiful.
So it's just it's sometimes it's just a reframing, another way of thinking about something, another way of appreciating and understanding your situation. Obviously, that's not going to make her take away all of those feelings of I wish I had 9 brothers and sisters. Right. But again, it's understanding and validating on one hand, and also learning to reframe and understand our position and where we are.
So 2 points. One is my friend Y.Y. Rubenstein has a website that allows Baalei Teshuvah who've been from for a while to get them resources and hook them up. So we'll give that out to you. But my wife always points out, says, when you make Aliyah and you leave most of your family in America, your friends and neighbors become your family.
That's right.
So for Baalei Teshuvah, the friends and neighbors are mamish their family. It's not just
absolutely. But people have to know how to take advantage of that. There are people who are shy.
Yeah.
There are people who have a hard time reaching out. But if you don't reach out, you're alone. And learning, that's another thing we speak about, is recognizing the importance for your family of you learning to reach out and get the support that you need.
I had a guy who he was an older single, and he told me after X number of years of still being older single, he says, I have to give up being from. And I said, why? He goes, I can't take it. The from world is not made for single people. He says, I sit with the other, older singles at Shalashudis fighting over the tuna salad. And I said, I can't live this way anymore.
That's definitely a challenge. It's another one of the challenges that's spoken about for sure. It's a serious challenge for a frum girl.
Right.
That's something that sometimes Baal Teshuvah doesn't understand.
Right.
That this is where family sometimes becomes even a bigger burden, because when mom and dad are on your case every day while you're not married, because in the frum world, why are you not married? And they're worried about you, and they're concerned about you, and they're always thinking, and everywhere you go, it's mitzvah bayu, mitzvah bayu, mitzvah bayu. The pressure is even worse on an older frum single than on a Baal Teshuvah single. The Baal Teshuvah single thinks, I'm single because I'm a Baal Teshuvah. And that's not the case. You're single because
in the secular world, the nuclear family, mommy, daddy, and children, is now the minimum. It's the minority of families in America.
Yes.
And a lot of it's being run by, to quote Senator Vance, childless cat ladies.
Yeah, it's
just to throw a little controversy out there and be current, All right, sad. So the first 5 years is really, now 10 years, we're assuming at that point you're married, you got kids. And the challenges change because you're dealing with building a family, again, in this society that is very, very different. You can't, your grandparents sometimes want to help in some ways, or sometimes they don't want to help. It depends. And we speak about both healthy grandparents and unhealthy grandparents. And they want to buy your kids the things that all the other kids have in what they see on television as being what all kids have. And you don't necessarily want your daughter to have biologically correct dolls, and you may not be interested in certain kinds of electronics, and so it's starting off transgender bathing
life,
suits,
right? It's just raising your children, or beginning to raise your children, or finding your way with a lot of hardship, because, like you said, you don't have the same support,
right,
as someone who has a mother, grandmother, and sisters-in-laws,
emotionally and financially,
and physically. Just somebody to come and babysit, somebody to come and take the kids for a day.
I'm watching little kids more now that I'm a grandparent than I did when I was a parent.
I remember when my youngest son, one day said to me, "They're winning." I said, "Who's winning?" He said, there are more, if one more baby's born, there can be more grandchildren than children.
Oh, we're way past that.
Yeah, so are we a number of times over.
That's right.
But the point is, you have more grandchildren to watch than you had children to watch.
That's right.
But in any case,
I watched in my generation, my parents had 6 boys, 37 grandchildren, and over 100 great grandchildren. Humorous. So,
we're
I'm just trying to figure out that if all my kids get married and have children, in even reasonable amounts, how am I supposed to make a Seder for 100 people? I'm trying to work that out. I'm going to need a bigger house.
Baruch Hashem.
So now we are 20 years.
Right.
Yeah.
No, 10 years.
10 years.
Right. So at 10 years already, we're dealing with a more complex family situation. Usually, again, this all depends on how people are building the family. Where are they living now? Now they're ready. Parnasa is a very, very big issue. There's so many people struggling in all over the world, just financially, and struggling with 3 or 4 kids is not struggling as a couple or with one child.
Right.
So there are new struggles. There are new questions. What am I doing? What I wanted to do? Am I doing what I should be doing? Is there other things that we should be looking at or reevaluating? And that's something that everyone has to do in life. But again, because somebody's coming from a different world, when you look at the form world, it's not perfect because you've seen the imperfections and how, and that's another thing that people are dealing with. And 10 years later, you're feeling it more because children getting into schools and so on in some cities and some of the bigger metropolitan from areas. At the same time,
right, but it
looks like they've got it all worked out.
The frum world is the worst world except for everything else. Someone once said that about democracy. Yeah. Democracy is the worst form of government except for every other one. So the frum world is, with all the problems, or of us.
There are many challenges. We're in Golus for 2,000 years. We have lost leadership. We're limited leadership. The community is growing by leaps and bounds, and there are not enough person when the Chazal call it a dor yasam, an orphan generation. From people have a hard time. Like you said, when you mentioned Reb Hanina Geisler and what he's opening up in Houston, girls have the same questions, the same problems. Right. Where they go back to school, boys leave yeshiva, and then what? So if you had a kesher with a Rebbe, you're okay. But if you don't, you're also somewhat lost. The only difference is that you have a family and you have a frame of reference.
Right.
The Baal Tshuva doesn't even have a frame of reference for these new situations. So the challenges are often similar, but they're magnified to the Baal Tshuva. And then very often he or she will think they've got it all worked out. I'm in this situation because I'm from. Mm-hmm. And then I start questioning, 1 second, what did I do? What did I do? And I go through in the book at different places things that sometimes come up as to why I question myself now, and whether or not those are really they're valid because I'm asking them. But are they? But let's try to replay it. Okay, let's go back to where it started, and let's go back to what you really have and what you don't have, and what you'd be going back to if you let go of it. So it's at 10 years there's sometimes a lot of rethinking. At 20 years, we're dealing with teenagers and marriage and shidduchim and yeshiva gedola, and these are very, very big, very, very big
from people,
for everyone,
right?
But for Baalei Tshuva even more. There are at least 300 girls over the years that have asked me if I could help them figure out, or help their parents. They never had anyone in shidduchim before. How do you do this shidduch thing? How do you do it? They went to college, they met people, and here that's not the way it works. So you have to call. You should do research. You shouldn't do research. Some parents say, "No, I don't believe in research. You'll meet them. Just meet anyone that's willing to meet you." And then that's very, very disturbing and challenging for some kids. And some parents overdo it.
My father could not figure out the shidduch system.
Right?
Why? You go away. Go out and have a good time.
Yeah.
That's what we used to do. Go out, or even within the frum world, and they would have a young Israel dance, you know what I mean? Or go down to the boardwalk and meet somebody and say, what is this? I got to check out everybody and this and all this time and negotiations and stuff. Just go out, see if you have a good time,
That's right.
And I could not explain it to him.
No, you can't. You can't. And that's why many of these people, many of these young kids, they're coming and they need the support of their former mentors to help them navigate the system.
Now, it's a truism. I don't know if it's true, but it's a truism that a lot of the off the derech kids are coming from families that are Baalei Teshuvah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It is unfortunately true.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.